Welcome to dentReviews. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Moondrop Blessing 2 Dusk. I don't have the box here, but it's basically the same exact box as the Blessing 2 with the Dusk logo and a different anime chick. If you want to look at that, just go watch the Blessing 2 review, and it's the same exact accessories and everything. So I have this in just a cheapo case that I got from, I think it was Walgreens or something. Super cheap, but it fits them really well. These are the Dusk. Now, again, if you watch my Blessing 2 review, this is going to share a lot in common with the Blessing 2, and I'll kind of go over the physical body just real quick, but same exact earphone design and style as the Blessing 2 Dusk. Well, it is the Dusk, as the Blessing 2 stock, I should say. The earpieces are 3D printed, very beautiful design. I love the translucent. This is very nice. You can see some resistors there on the circuit. It's just a great looking earphone. The cable itself is similar, if not identical, to the standard cable. It's got a right angle molding here, also translucent, which is very slim, fits in a lot of cases. Sort of your traditional copper braiding you'd see a small company hand make or whatever. It's got the Moondrop thing in the middle, which I don't really care for, but it hasn't really bothered me either. I've taken the Moondrop Velcro thing, I've cut it down smaller and just wrapped it around really tight to make a cord lock, which works really well. And then it has the same 2-pin connector for the earphones as the standard one as well. Same ear tips, same case, same everything. So I just put it in a different case. That's the physical body. Again, if you want more information on that, check it out in the the Blessing 2 review. This is the Dusk. And the real only delineation between them is that it says Blessing 2 Dusk instead of just Blessing 2. So you get that little extra word there to make you feel special. I'm going to jump right into it. How do these sound? Because that's really what this review is. These are basically the similar tuning that Moondrop made for the Blessing 2, but Kryn over at In-Ear Fidelity, I believe it is, he is an advocate of the IEF target and maybe some extra bass, whatever. I don't know. He has his own target preference, and it's a very good target. And he decided to work with Moondrop, I guess, and have them modify the Blessing to improve the bass response with a really low elevated bass shelf and a slightly modified treble, very slight, to give these what I consider a more balanced sound, a little bit more full, very low end, like the sub bass to really low bass. So it doesn't bleed at all into the mids. In fact, if you were to listen to this versus the Blessing 2 on an acoustic track of some sort that didn't have a lot of like low bass content, you know, you'd be hard-pressed to hear the difference between them unless you're very critically kind of switching and listening side by side. But the second you have any kind of body, whether it's an acoustic guitar or actually a techno track with bass, you'll start to hear the difference. These have a lot more full sub-bass response, and in my opinion, it brings it more in line with the treble. There are very, very few songs where maybe the bass appears to be slightly elevated, maybe a decibel or two too much, which I know is nitpicking, but just talking about trying to get a perfect neutral target, it can sometimes seem a bit much, but overall, for most genres and styles, it really strikes an excellent balance between the treble. So, everything I said about the Blessing 2 review is pretty similar here. They're very neutral, the mids are incredibly smooth, sort of have a warm sound to them, a little bit more so than the stock B2 in the low mids, but the kind of, I'm not sure which response, 600 hertz, I think, somewhere around there, is a little bit lower on these by a decibel or two and a little bit more on the Blessing 2. But what that does is it kind of gives these a little, I don't know if you call it a scoop, but a curve into that bass response that makes the bass sound very tight and very controlled, where I think if they had shelved it without doing that little scoop, it might have sounded a little bit more warm and maybe overly warm. So I do like that tuning choice for these in particular. Other than that, the mids and the treble are pretty much the same as the Blessing 2. The A-Killer peak and another slight peak below that are slightly tamed. And I say slightly because, I mean, not much at all, maybe half a decibel. It's not a lot. But the treble is ever so slightly, I think, smoother and less maybe raspy. Because there is more bass presence, they don't maybe sound as open as the Blessing 2, but openness is very dependent on the recording. So I'd almost say the Blessing 2 maybe is an artificial openness, not artificial in the sense that fake, but the response curve that they chose lends itself more to treble than bass, so it kind of gives it the impression of an openness. I think the Blessing 2 is a very good response, and even though they're not as much bass as these, they still have a very warm, relaxing sound to them. These are just a little bit more tonally correct to my ears. Technically, they're almost identical to the Blessing 2 as well. The width, the stereo image is the same as far as I can tell. All the instruments, the depth, the placement, and the precision of things is the same. It's very, very good. These are a very highly competent earphone. They're very comfortable. I talked about that in the other review as well. Just the fit and the finish, they are a little bit on the thicker side because they share the same nozzle and design as the Blessing 2. You're going to get a little bit of a thick nozzle, so if you're not comfortable with bigger ear tips and your ear canals are a little bit narrow, these might be on the thick and maybe uncomfortable side for you. Even though the body's large, it's more depth than it is shape, although they are still fairly large in terms of like a custom IEM shape. But for me personally, they fit probably better than any earphone I've actually used. I think these are incredibly comfortable, and I prefer the thick nozzle because it helps to just slightly better seal the canal and block out sound and make an easier fit for me. But that's going to be a very, personal, subjective thing. But sound-wise, again, just it's very neutral. It's very clean. I think if you compared it to the JVC FDX01, which I reviewed and I love, it's not as much presence in that lower treble, so things don't sound as cool and smooth and more of a natural timbre when it comes to acoustic instruments and things like that. But again, it's very slight, so compared to other instruments, it does. But I think the JVC is a little bit better in that regard. But these take a very similar response to the JVC, but with a little bit more relaxing sound in the lower half. Everything just has a slightly more, I don't want to say warm, but easier to listen to attribute. Whereas the JVC can sometimes be a little bit not fatiguing to me, but I could see how someone might think it's on the honky, fatiguing side. But I think those are very, very excellent earphones. These are just a little bit more relaxing. They have great treble extension, not the most treble air. At about 10 kilohertz or so, there is a dip in the treble, which can easily be rectified with EQ, and they're very capable of reproducing those frequencies. But the stock EQ, or stock frequency response, does lack a little bit of air and a little bit of that 2 to 3 kilohertz area, maybe by a decibel or two. And there's a slight peak at the 8 kilohertz still. Not as bad as the stock, but it's still there. So you get a little bit of that rasp that you had with the Blessing 2, but it's a little bit more tame. It's never ever sibilant or uncomfortable. It's always very resolving, very smooth, very easy to listen to. But it does slightly alter the tonality of the treble section and makes it a little less like truly revealing, like I believe the JVC are. So it is what it is, but for the price, $320, are these worth it? Absolutely. I think these are probably more value for the money than the Blessing 2. Each has their strengths, depending on whether you prefer a lean, maybe more upper mids and more treble presence. And these are for if you like that bass body and a little bit more tame treble. And again, it's slight in the treble, but it's still a little bit more tame. But $320 for practically custom IEMs, shape and design, with phenomenal sound quality, excellent frequency response, very clean, very clear, just a very relaxing but resolving sound. I really don't think there is another pair of these style of earphones for the price that are better. I think for $320, these are the pinnacle. I mean, Moondrop is absolutely dominating the value IEMs, if you call this value. The Starfield for $110 are so close to these in quality that, I mean, you have to wonder if you should just get those and be happy saving your money. But if you're just clinical about the mid-range and the overall tonality, and you want the little bit better separation and width and just a more capable technical IEM, I think the price is definitely worth it, and $320 is not bad. But at $320, these still punch way above their weight. I think I've heard headphones that are in the $1,000, and these sound better. So I'm incredibly eager to hear their other offering, like the S8. That's the next one I'd love to hear. For now, my daily drivers in general are the Blessing 2 Dusk and the JVC FDX01. And if I need the isolation, the ER4XR. Those are my three, and frankly, with those three in my pocket, I could probably do without any earphone I've ever heard before. They're just all that good with slight strengths and weaknesses, but they're just so good for the value that I really don't have any desire to try anything else at that price point. I would rather just go to something like the S8. So hopefully I'll get those maybe on a loan or something. I'll compare them. But for the Blessing 2 Dusk at that price range, super highly recommend it. If you have any questions at all, just leave them below. Check out the review I'm going to do comparing all of these earphones. And as always, thank you guys for watching.